Have you ever asked yourself whether a job could actually kill you? I don't mean burnout or a wreck on a slick road. I mean literally taken, swallowed, erased. That's what I found out the night I took the world's most ordinary job. Toll booth operator on a lonely, forgotten stretch of Highway 371 in rural Arkansas. On paper, it was laughable. Sit in a tiny booth, collect cash, raise the gate, jot down plates. No benefits, no overtime, just a paycheck that barely patched the holes in my life. But under that thin shell of routine, something festered and rotted, something nobody bothered to warn me about. I took it because I had no other choice. My car had finally given up. Rent was overdue. My landlord's anger was a steady thing at the door. A cousin I barely knew shoved me this lifeline. They're hiring. No forms. Show up tonight. You start now. When the supervisor slid a ring of rusty keys across the counter, he muttered, almost under his breath, "Don't mind the strange stuff. Just follow the alerts." I laughed the kind of laugh you make when you're too tired to be afraid. I thought he meant storms or traffic bulletins. I had no idea. That first night swallowed me whole. I pulled up at 10:45 p.m., the southern heat like damp cloth on my skin. The booth was smaller than a closet, a vinyl chair cracked like old leather, a desk scarred with burns and stains, a cash drawer that stuck, and a yellowed notepad clinging to its last pages. The fan gasped and wheezed but pushed no mercy, and on the far wall, impossible and obscene in that cramped space, was the clock. Not a normal clock. It had no hands, no numbers, no buttons, only a pulsing red screen, dim and alive, like the heart of something that shouldn't exist. It did not tell time. It issued verdicts. At 1:13 a.m., the screen snapped into life with a single command: stand up. Before my brain could file this away as a symptom or a prank, a voice slid into my skull not through the air but through bone. A cold, mechanical whisper with the intimacy of a threat. Emergency alert. Rule 4. Between 1:10 and 1:20 a.m., do not remain seated. Every hair on my arms stood like matchsticks. My hands went numb with the kind of fear that steals breath. I shoved the chair back and stood on legs that shook. Outside the smeared window, something moved along the asphalt. No step, no footfall, only a blackness that crawled, a slug of shadow that clung to the ground as if the road itself had split open and spilled night. It had no face to stare with and no sound to announce itself. It simply was, a blot of endless hunger under the moon. At 1:20, the clock snapped black, and the shape slid away. I still tasted iron. That was Rule 4. That was the night I learned this job wasn't about tolls. It was about enduring whatever shared that stretch with me. By the end of that first collapsing week, I had scrawled 7 rules in tremulous handwriting on the notepad, their edges ragged from the frantic turning of pages. They weren't from any manual. They arrived in the night, whispered through the clock's glow, each one a thin lifeline sewn from absurdity and terror. And I learned almost instantly that breaking a rule was not a mistake. It was a sentence. Rule number 1. If the same car comes by twice within 10 minutes, charge double. Rule number 2. If a child is driving, let them go. Don't take the money. Don't ask. Rule number 3. If you hear knocking beneath the floorboards, turn the booth radio on immediately. Rule number 4. Between 1:10 and 1:20 a.m., do not sit. Remain standing until the clock says otherwise. Rule number 5. If someone speaks backwards, do not look at them. Keep your gaze low. Do not meet their eyes. Rule number 6. If an old woman pays in exact change, hold her gaze. Make certain they are human. Rule number 7. If the clock flashes hide, crawl under the desk, and for God's sake, do not breathe loudly enough to be heard. I mocked none of them after I saw what happened to the men who dared to scoff. On my 12th night, a faint tapping started beneath me, little at first, as if someone were drumming fingertips, a rhythm that matched the thud of my own heartbeat. Rule 3. The knock grew louder, like a person impatient and deliberate. I froze, stupid with dread. I told myself it was nothing, rats, old boards settling, but the doubt was a luxury I could no longer afford. Then the floor cracked. A gray hand erupted from a jagged split in the wood, sinew and pallor stretched tight over knobbly joints. It had 6 fingers, grotesquely long, each tipped with a nail like a shard of glass. The thing slid along the leg of my chair with patient cruelty and curled its fingers as if cataloging. My throat closed on a sound that would not come. Instinct faxed my muscles, and my fingers smacked the radio switch. Static filled the booth, a white roar that buried everything. The hand recoiled, its clawed lengths flexing once before sinking back through the seam as if the floor had swallowed it whole. The split sealed itself as though it had never happened. I sat shaking on the ground until dawn. After that, sleep became a rumor I chased and never caught. The rules etched themselves into my nerves. They escalated. They rewrote. One night, the clock pulsed a single word. EYES. The voice returned with surgical calm. Rule 6. If an old woman pays with exact change, verify her eyes. I barely had time to steady my hands before she was at the window. Skin like paper, yellow and creased, nails like brittle leaves. Her hand trembled as she held out bills and coins. 125, right? She breathed, and the tone of that breath dragged cold across me like a winter wind. Where her eyes should have been were pits, vacant caves of black. Not blind sockets, empty carved hollows. The sight slammed ice into my veins. I wanted to slam the window, to run, to do anything but look. But when I blinked and looked back, she was gone. The car, the coins, every trace had vanished like smoke. Only the pages of my notepad fluttered as if turned by invisible fingers. A new line had bled onto the paper, raw and angry. Rule number 8. Never let the old woman speak twice. Another night at 2:04, I watched a silver SUV drift by, dust cake on the paint, a dent in the bumper, a pine tree air freshener swinging like a pendulum. At 2:09, the same SUV materialized again, same dent, same dangling tree. I charged twice the toll and watched the driver unravel. He gripped the wheel, voice thin and cracked. "Sir, how am I back here?" I didn't turn around. There's no exit. His face was pale as linen. I couldn't tell him anything. The road obeyed rules I didn't make. Then headlights flared in his mirror. An identical silver SUV slid into view. Same dents, same dust, but this one carried no driver. It moved with the awful precision of a thing on rails, and the living driver's eyes widened as he watched his supposed reflection. No humanity behind it, only a hollow shell. He tried to speak, and the words came out like smoke. The uselessness of language stood exposed. By the 3rd week, I'd stopped trying to understand cause. The apparatus of explanation was broken. Only obedience remained. Follow the rule, and you might make dawn. Disobey for curiosity, and you paid with a price that chewed at more than the flesh. Then came a night when the clock didn't hand me a rule. It hurled a headline, "Danger, danger, danger." The voice tore through me. "Emergency override." Hide. Now I dove beneath the desk, heart trying to hammer its way out of my chest. Something scraped the asphalt outside, a sound like metal being dragged over stone, slow and endless. Bigger than anything that should be on the highway, it moved like a leviathan chastening the shore. It had no shadow, no roar, only that thin, grinding rasp, and then a voice as if rust itself had learned to speak. "Rule breaker, where are you?" It listed what it deemed offenses. A missed step, a hesitation, a mercy given when it wasn't allowed. The lights died and the dark pressed in like a hand. I held my breath until my lungs burned. When the noise finally passed, the paper on my pad had changed. Fresh ink, like scorch marks, spelled out a new decree. Rule number 9, you only get one warning. After that, the rules took on a finality that felt like teeth closing. Sometimes the clock was dark for hours, no alerts, no instructions. And those were the nights when the highway felt most alive with eyes. I watched ghosts I knew drive past. A cousin who'd been gone for 5 years, smiling in the driver's seat like it was a reunion. My mother, waving, her hair the same as in the photographs. Friends, neighbors, faces of the dead behind glass, waving like it was ordinary. I taught myself to look only at coins, at plates, at the cracked dashboard. Recognition is a door. Open it, and you invite the thing to step through. So I don't ask questions. I people watch with the distance of a predator who has learned the cost of curiosity. There were moments I thought I could leave. I packed a bag one dawn, my hand on the booth latch, legs trembling. My body was already running through the first steps toward whatever I hoped freedom would be. Then the clock pulsed, one last word, stay. The voice followed, soft and absolute. Final rule, if you leave, it follows you. I felt the air drain from the room. The cloth in my throat tightened into knots. Something about that sentence was not a threat. It was a property. If you exit this place, whatever owns it will fold into your shadow and trail you home until you are not you anymore. So I remain. I watch. I listen for the faint red flicker. I obey. And every time the cursed light comes alive, I scratch more rules into the margins of the notepad. My Bible of survival written in spidery, frantic lines. Out here on Highway 371, the toll is no longer cash. It's breath, it's choices, it's obedience. It is whatever price the road demands to keep walking past. If you ever find yourself on a stretch of dark asphalt, sitting in a tin box with a red face staring back at you, remember this: the clock does not bargain. It only commands, and when it speaks, you learn fast that the difference between living and becoming another face in the windshield is simply whether you listened. Because here, where the night pools thick and the road sighs, survival is a list you can never finish. And I am still writing,